Every shadow has a story, and some are never meant to be forgotten. Welcome back to HistorianNap. If you crave...
It was exactly 2:15 a.m. Caleb Miller hated the graveyard shift, but at 22, working the counter at Outpost 66 in the middle of the New Mexico desert was the only job that paid his college tuition. Outside, the neon sign of the gas station buzzed weakly, casting a sickly red glow onto the empty highway. For 60 miles in either direction, there was nothing but sand, cactus, and pitch-black darkness. Caleb sipped his cold, bitter coffee from a paper cup, scrolling through his phone. No service. There hadn't been any service since midnight. Sound effect, ding-dong. The electronic chime of the convenience store door opening. Caleb looked up, startled. He hadn't heard a car pull up to the gas pumps. Walking through the door was a man wearing a thick, dirty winter coat, which was strange because it was a warm July night in the desert. The man's head was tilted down, a wide-brimmed cowboy hat hiding his face. "Welcome to Outpost 66, Caleb said, his voice echoing in the quiet store. "Can I help you find something?" The man didn't answer. He walked with a strange, limping gait toward the back coolers. His boots left wet, muddy tracks on the clean linoleum floor. But it hadn't rained in New Mexico for 3 months. Sound effect, the heavy, slow thud of boots. The hum of the refrigerator door opening. Caleb watched the man through the security mirrors. The stranger stood in front of the drinks, but he wasn't looking at them. He was staring at his own reflection in the glass. "Sir, the register is up here if you're ready," Caleb called out, a knot of unease tightening in his stomach. The man slowly turned around. When Caleb saw his face, his heart dropped. The man's skin looked wrong. It was too pale, almost gray, and stretched so tightly over his cheekbones that it looked like a mask. But the worst part was his eyes. They were wide, unblinking, and completely black. The stranger walked to the counter. He didn't place snacks or drinks on the counter. Instead, he reached into his pocket and slammed down an old, rusted silver coin. "I need fuel," the man said. His voice didn't sound human. It sounded like two dry rocks scraping together, a distorted, mechanical whisper. Pump number 3 is open, sir." "That'll be $20, Caleb stammered, refusing to touch the rusted coin. The stranger didn't move. He just stared at Caleb, his mouth slowly stretching into a wide, unnatural smile that showed too many teeth. "Not for the truck," the whisper came again. "Fuel for me." Sound effect, a sudden, sharp power flicker. The lights go completely black for 2 seconds, then snap back on with a loud buzz. When the lights came back, the counter was empty. The man was gone. Sound effect, heavy breathing. Quick, frantic footsteps on wood. The outdoor wind chimes shattering outside. Caleb's hands shook as he locked the front glass doors of the store. He ran to the back office, locking himself inside. He grabbed the landline phone to call the police, but the line was dead. Only a wet, breathing sound came through the receiver. Suddenly, the security monitors on the wall flickered. Caleb gasped. On the outdoor camera, he saw the stranger, but he wasn't on 2 legs anymore. The entity was crawling on all 4s like a spider, moving with impossible speed across the asphalt. Sound effect, thump. It was on the roof. Caleb looked up, tears of absolute terror blurring his vision as he heard the heavy, dragging sound of something moving directly above the ceiling tiles. Then, the store's intercom system, the microphone at the front register, spoke. But it wasn't the stranger's voice anymore. It was Caleb's own voice, perfectly replicated, coming through the speakers. "Welcome to Outpost 66. Can I help you find something?" The ceiling tile directly above Caleb's head began to crack. A pale, gray hand with long, jagged black fingernails pushed through the drywall. Caleb screamed, throwing himself against the back door of the office that led to the dark desert outside. He burst through the door, running blindly into the pitch-black night, leaving the glowing neon sign of Outpost 66 behind him. He ran until his lungs burned, not daring to look back. Sound effect, the sound of running stops. Total silence, save for Caleb's heavy panting. He stopped in the middle of the dark highway, looking back at the distant light of the gas station. He thought he was safe, until he felt a cold, dry breath right against his ear. And a familiar, mechanical whisper echoed in the stranger stood frozen in front of the beverage cooler. Through the convex security mirrors hanging in the corner of the ceiling, Caleb watched him. His pulse gave a heavy, uncomfortable thud against his ribs. The man wasn't looking at the energy drinks or the sodas. He was staring directly at his own reflection in the glass, his body completely rigid. Seconds stretched into a long, suffocating minute. The only sound in the entire convenience store was the low hum of the fluorescent lights overhead and the ticking of the clock behind the counter. 2:28 a.m. Sound effect. Soft rustle of paper as Caleb nervously shifts his weight. "Sir." Caleb's voice cracked slightly, cutting through the heavy silence. He cleared his throat, trying to sound professional. "The register is up here if you're ready to check out." The stranger didn't move. He didn't even blink. "Sir," Caleb repeated, louder this time, his hand slowly sliding beneath the counter, searching for the panic button he knew had been disconnected months ago. Slowly, agonizingly slowly, the man began to turn around. His movements were jerky, unnatural, like a marionette being pulled by invisible, clumsy strings. When the light finally hit his face, Caleb's breath caught in his throat. Every instinct in his body screamed at him to run. Sound effect, a sudden, sharp violin swell or a low sub-bass drop to signify intense dread. The man's skin was wrong. It didn't look like flesh. It looked like gray, decayed leather stretched so tight over his high cheekbones that it threatened to tear. There were no lines, no pores, no signs of life. But it was his eyes that made Caleb's stomach violently turn. They weren't normal eyes. They were wide, completely black pools. No white, no iris. Just a glassy, midnight void reflecting the harsh fluorescent light. The entity began walking toward the counter. With every step, its knees bent at strange, sickening angles. Sound effect. Loud, wet footsteps approaching, thud, thud, thud. Caleb backed up until his spine hit the cigarette rack behind him. He wanted to look away, but he was paralyzed. The stranger stopped right at the counter. He didn't reach for a wallet. Instead, he lifted a pale, trembling hand and slammed a single, heavy object onto the counter. Sound effect, clink. The heavy metallic sound of an old coin spinning and settling. It was a large, rusted silver coin covered in dark, dried, crusted stains. "I need fuel," the man said. Caleb flinched. The voice didn't come from the man's throat. It sounded like two massive, dry boulders grinding against each other, mixed with a distorted, mechanical hiss. It echoed in the small store, vibrating in Caleb's ears. P-pump number 3 is active," Caleb stammered, his eyes darting between the rusted coin and the black voids of the man's eyes. "That'll be $20. Cash or card, please." I can't take that coin." The stranger didn't reply. Instead, his lips began to peel back. The skin around his mouth cracked as he forced a smile. It was a wide, impossible grin that stretched from ear to ear, revealing rows of sharp, yellowed teeth that were far too numerous for a human mouth. "Not for the truck," the mechanical whisper scraped through the air again. The creature leaned forward, the smell of old copper and rotting wood hitting Caleb's nose. "Fuel for me." Sound effect, bzztt. A violent electrical surge. The overhead lights flicker violently, plunging the store into pitch-black darkness for 3 long seconds. The country music on the radio turns into a high-pitched screech. Caleb let out a choked gasp in the dark. Sound effect, snap. The lights turned back on, humming weakly. The counter was empty. The rusted coin was gone. The stranger was gone. The front glass doors were still closed and locked from the inside. Caleb didn't think. He ran. He sprinted to the back office, slammed the heavy metal door, and turned the lock with trembling hands. His chest heaved as he pressed his back against the door, sliding down to the cold floor. Tears of pure adrenaline blurred his vision. The silence in the office was deafening. He stared at the old landline phone on the desk. Sound effect, scrambling footsteps across the room. The sound of a plastic phone receiver being lifted. With shaking fingers, Caleb dialed 911. He pressed the receiver to his ear, praying for a dispatcher's voice. But there was no dial tone. Sound effect, statics, followed by a wet, heavy, rhythmic breathing sound through the phone line. "Hello? Anyone there?" Caleb whispered loudly, panic clawing at his throat. Through the static, the breathing stopped. Then, a wet click echoed in his ear. Caleb dropped the phone as if it had burned him. It clattered onto the desk, the eerie silence returning. Sound effect, high-pitched electrical whine as the CCTV monitor screen flickers on the wall. Caleb's eyes slowly drifted up to the security monitors. The screen showing the outdoor gas pumps was washing out with static, but the camera covering the side perimeter was clear. Caleb choked back a sob. The stranger was there, but it wasn't walking anymore. The entity was dropped down on all fours, its limbs bent backward like a massive, deformed spider. Its gray skin glistened under the dim security lights. With a sudden, sickening jerk, it began to sprint across the asphalt, not toward the doors, but toward the side wall of the building. It moved with an impossible, erratic speed that no human could ever achieve. Sound effect. A heavy, metallic thump directly above Caleb's head, shaking the dust from the ceiling tiles. Caleb froze. His heart stopped beating. It was on the roof. Sound effect. Slow, heavy dragging sound across the ceiling drywall. Scritch, scratch. The sound of long fingernails scraping overhead. The creature was moving directly above him. Caleb buried his face in his knees, covering his ears, trying to block out the sound. Suddenly, the store's intercom system, the microphone at the front register, cracked to life. A loud hum vibrated through the office speakers, but the voice that came out wasn't the creature's mechanical whisper. It was Caleb's own voice. It sounded exactly like him, perfectly replicated, but completely devoid of emotion. "Welcome to Outpost 66. Can I help you find something?" Sound effect. The intercom voice distorts, slowing down into a demonic, deep growl. "Can I help you?" Sound effect. A loud, violent crack of breaking drywall and splintering wood. Right above the desk, the ceiling tile shattered. A pale, gray hand, tipped with 5-inch, jagged black fingernails, punched through the ceiling. The hand reached down, blindly clawing the air, searching for him. "No, no, please." Caleb screamed. He scrambled backward on his hands and knees, kicking open the rusted emergency exit door that led out to the back of the station. He burst into the freezing desert air. Sound effect. The heavy metal door bangs open. The violent rushing sound of desert wind. Rapid, heavy footsteps crunching frantically on dry gravel and sand. He didn't look back. He ran blindly into the pitch-black void of the New Mexico desert, leaving the glowing red neon sign of Outpost 66 behind him. The darkness swallowed him whole. He ran until his lungs burned like fire, until his legs gave out. Sound effect. Footsteps abruptly stop. The wind drops to a low, eerie whistle. Only Caleb's ragged, exhausted panting can be heard. He stood in the middle of the empty, dark highway, miles away from the station. He looked back. The distant red light of Outpost 66 flickered once, then went completely dark. Silence. Total, suffocating silence. Caleb closed his eyes, letting out a ragged sigh of relief. He thought he had escaped. He thought he was safe, until he felt a freezing, bone-dry breath blow directly against the back of his neck, and a familiar, mechanical whisper scraped right into his ear. "Shift change, Caleb. The desert sun usually brings warmth to New Mexico, but at 6:15 a.m., the morning light over Outpost 66 felt cold, pale, and hollow. The vast expanse of sand was completely still, showing no signs of the terror that had unfolded just hours before. Sound effect. The distant, approaching rumble of a heavy diesel engine. Tires crunching slowly on the gravel parking lot. A massive, blue 18-wheeler truck pulled up to pump number 3. The brakes hissed loudly as the driver, an older man named Marcus, stepped out of the cabin. He stretched his tired back, rubbing his bloodshot eyes after a 12-hour drive across the state line. He needed a strong black coffee to stay awake. Marcus walked toward the convenience store. As he reached the front entrance, he noticed something strange. The glass doors were completely unlocked. In fact, they were slightly ajar, swaying gently in the morning breeze. Sound effect. Ding dong. The electronic chime echoes weakly as Marcus pushes the door open. "Hey, anyone awake?" Marcus called out, his deep voice bouncing off the metal shelves. No answer. The store was eerily quiet. The small radio behind the counter was dead, emitting only a faint, rhythmic static. Marcus walked closer, his boots clicking on the clean floor. He stopped. Right in front of the counter, there were dark, wet tracks. It looked like mud, drying quickly under the morning sun. But it hadn't rained in weeks. Marcus looked behind the counter. The register was open, but the money inside was untouched. Instead, resting right on top of the cash drawer, was an old, rusted silver coin covered in dark, dried stains. Kids these days probably fell asleep in the back, Marcus muttered to himself, shaking his head. He walked toward the back hallway to check the manager's office. Sound effect: low, ominous cello notes playing softly in the background. The heavy metal door to the back office was wide open, swinging loosely on its hinges. The drywall above the desk was completely shattered, leaving a gaping, black hole in the ceiling. Pieces of white plaster lay scattered across the floor like bone fragments. Marcus frowned, a sudden chill running down his spine. Something was terribly wrong here. He reached into his pocket, pulling out his phone to dial the sheriff's department. Suddenly, the store's intercom system buzzed to life. Sound effect: static crackle, followed by the sound of a microphone being adjusted. Marcus froze, his phone halfway to his ear. From the ceiling speakers, a voice spoke. It was a young voice, clear but completely flat, devoid of any human emotion or warmth. It sounded exactly like Caleb Miller. "Welcome to Outpost 66. The voice broadcasted through the empty store. "Can I help you find something?" Marcus felt the hairs on his arms stand up. "Hello? Is someone up there?" he called out, looking up at the dark, shattered hole in the ceiling. From the pitch-black void inside the ceiling, there was no reply. Only the faint, familiar sound of two dry rocks grinding together, a distorted, mechanical hiss that sounded like a sickening grin. Marcus slowly backed away, dropping his phone onto the floor. Behind the counter, the digital clock clicked over to 6:30 a.m. The morning shift had officially begun. By 8 a.m., the blinding New Mexico sun had completely washed away the shadows of the night. 3 sheriff's department vehicles stood parked outside Outpost 66, their red and blue lights flashing uselessly against the bright daylight. Deputy Sheriff Reyes stood inside the back office, looking up at the shattered ceiling tile. He snapped a photo of the gaping black hole, his face grim. "Any sign of the kid?" Reyes asked, turning to his partner. The older deputy shook his head, bagging a small object from the counter. "Nothing. Caleb Miller's car is still parked out front. His keys, his wallet, his phone, all left behind in the office. It's like he just vanished into thin air." "What about the truck driver who called it in?" "Marcus? He's outside, still shaking," the deputy whispered, looking back toward the convenience store counter. "He keeps swearing he heard the kid's voice over the intercom. But the weirdest part? Look what we found on the register." The deputy pointed to the evidence bag. Inside was an old, rusted silver coin covered in dark, dried stains. Reyes sighed, rubbing his temples. "Run the plates on the truck Marcus saw last night. Let's get a search party out in the desert. The heat out there will kill a man in hours." Sound effect: the sound of the deputy's heavy boots walking away, their voices fading as they exit the building. The heavy glass front door clicked shut. The store fell dead silent once more. The police tape outside fluttered gently in the hot desert wind. Behind the counter, the security monitors suddenly crackled. The static cleared for just a fraction of a second. On the camera screen of the back office, right inside the pitch-black void of the broken ceiling, 2 wide, unblinking, pitch-black eyes rolled forward, staring directly into the camera lens. And then,